In this video, we're going to go over series circuit and how the components are related to each other in a series circuit. And to do that, we are going to modify the circuit that we built in our from our first project, from our very first circuit. So we don't have to completely start from scratch. The components that we'll just be adding an additional switch, and along with that switch, you're going to need another jumper wire. Okay, so first thing is to remind you, safety first, is make sure that there's no power going to your Arduino board, and you'll be able to verify that by looking at the power LED and making sure that it's off. So now it's off. Remove the LED and remove the jumper wire. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to take the switch, our second switch, and I'm going to place it and make sure your orientation is correct. And I'm going to place it one leg in pin 11, in row 11, because I want to make sure that it's connected to the end of this jumper cable that I have here, this first jumper cable that I have. And then when you place these switches in the breadboard, naturally they'll skip a space, and then the second leg will end up in 2 rows down. So if my first pin is in row 11, second pin is going to end up in row 13. That's where my next jumper comes into place. And I'm going to just as long as it's one pin is in the same row as the second pin on my switch, which is row 13, then in this case the other leg ends up in row 16. So that's when I'm going to take my LED. Make sure your orientation, your polarity is correct, and the long leg is the anode, so that's the positive side. The positive, remember this is coming from 5 volts, and so this is going to be positive. I'm actually going to go to column E. There we go. All right. Okay. So I've got my anode on the side and the cathode here, which ends up in row 17. So now I go from row 17 back to ground. So I use this third jumper wire to plug in row 17 and go back to the negative column in the power bus channel. Right? So before we apply any power to our board, let's make sure what we have here matches up with what's on our schematic. So looking at the schematic, you see that, let's see, just like before, we go for 5 volts out, and we go to our 220 ohm resistor here. Good. And then from our 220 ohm resistor, we're going into our first switch, or push button here. And then out of this push button, through the jumper cable, into the second push button. And then from the second push button through the jumper cable to the LED here. And remember to verify your polarity. And then from the LED, we end up back here at ground. So from the LED here, you'll see that we go back through this jumper cable here, back in the ground. So it looks like everything is hooked up correctly, and now we're ready to apply power to the board.